welcome in all of you no off-seasoners to your new favorite fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and today we're talking Baker Mayfield traded to the Carolina Panthers in the first major move for the Panthers GM, Fitterer, and Matt Rule taking a step forward in making it more of a win-now move, which is absolutely what they need. Matt Rule, on one of the hottest seats in the entire NFL, goes out and gets the former number one overall pick of the 2018 class. And now the Panthers possess two of the top three picks of that same draft class. And folks, I do not believe that this is any type of a quarterback competition. I know they only invested a fifth round conditional pick for Baker Mayfield. So, right, it's a very low investment, but it's because the Cleveland Browns weren't selling for a very high price. The Browns were looking to get something out of Baker Mayfield because they knew he was not returning to camp, even with the whole Deshaun Watson mess they've got going on up there in Ohio. So what does this mean for the Carolina Panthers? I think immediately the Panthers go from a 3 to 4 win team to a 7-8, and maybe if we're optimistic, a 9-win team with Baker Mayfield. Yes, he is that much better. Yes, Sam Darnold is that much worse, and we will get to that in just a moment. I'm a little baffled that Baker Mayfield was actually acquired or traded for prior to Jimmy Garoppolo. Just want to go on this tangent for just a moment, if you allow me. Jimmy Garoppolo is 5-1 in the postseason in the same amount of time Baker Mayfield has been around. 5-1. He's only lost one postseason game, and that was to Mahomes and the Super Bowl winning champion Chiefs in 2019. Baker Mayfield is 1-1 in the postseason. 1-1. So there's likely something out there that we don't know. Jimmy G, is he potentially staying in San Francisco? Are the 49ers saying that he doesn't have a price, or you cannot meet this price because we think he might still start for us? Or are there medical issues that we don't know about for Jimmy G, so no one's trading for him yet? We will soon find out, as we are only, a month away from preseason. We're about a month and a half away from your fantasy football drafts. So if you're here, you're ahead of the game. So let's keep it that way. So immediately, Baker becomes QB 17 with high-end QB2 upside, maybe very low-end QB1 upside. 650 attempts, 4,482 passing yards, about 27 touchdowns, and about 8 interceptions. Okay, it doesn't sound too good. He's just behind Ryan Tannehill and just ahead of Carson Wentz of the Washington Commanders. Now, this, to me, means more to DJ Moore than it does for Baker Mayfield. DJ Moore is by far, in a way, the best receiver that Baker Mayfield has had, especially on a fantasy football standpoint. Jarvis Landry was great. Jarvis Landry was by far the favorite target for Baker Mayfield in his time in Cleveland. And of course, as most of you know, Jarvis Landry did line up in the slot most of the time. Now, DJ Moore does not always line up in the slot. He's versatile. He can line up in both, but the majority of the time he is lined up outside. Now, that's not a reason to fade him. In the short amount of time that OBJ was in Cleveland, that was one of Baker's favorite targets. And I think surprisingly, the one player in Carolina that this kind of hurts just a smidge is actually Christian McCaffrey. And I want to talk about this for a moment, is that Chubb and Hunt in Cleveland, while Baker Mayfield was there, they were only 6th and 7th respectively in targets for the Cleveland Browns over those 4 years. Only 6th and 7th. Even Njoku was ahead of them. Even Austin Hooper was ahead of them. And we'll talk about the Carolina Panthers tight ends in just a moment. So, again, This is way better for DJ Moore than it is for Baker Mayfield. For all of those of you who were holding on Baker Mayfield, hoping something would happen in Dynasty, you nailed it. The former number 1 overall pick gets a second chance. I think this is a brilliant move by Fitterer, the GM in Carolina, and Matt Rule. They are one losing season away from losing their jobs. They most certainly are. So what do you go out and do? You got to right your wrongs when you're a coach, when you're a GM. You have to be able to buckle down and say, we got it wrong here. How are we going to owe it back to the fans? How are we going to owe it back to the donors, the season ticket holders, whatever, right? How do you recapture the love for the team instead of perpetually just being terrible? Now, Baker hasn't been the all-star number 1 overall pick that he probably should have been, but he also hasn't had the amazing situation that some of the other number 1 picks have had. He's constantly had to learn new playbooks. He's constantly had to have new systems, new offensive coordinators, all the way from Hugh Jackson to Freddie Kitchens to Stefanski. You're picking up what I'm putting down. So, and this is no different, right? He's going to have to learn the new system with Matt Rule, the former Baylor head coach. Very pro-style, shotgun, I formation type running style. I think they're going to actually move a little bit more and have to adapt to the spread offense if they want to compete with the New Orleans Saints, where they have the gunslinger Jameis Winston. Tom Brady is still in Tampa Bay, came back out of retirement. This is going to be a tough division for the Panthers to come out and get a wild card, but that's what they're aiming for. I don't think they're going to be able to beat out Brady and the Buccaneers. They just have a much better roster. But I am not ruling them out as a wild card team. Baker makes them that much better. On 4,000 more attempts, this is how much better Baker Mayfield has been as a passer. I will say, full transparency, Baker Mayfield, weirdly enough, has not been a better rusher. He's not been better with his legs than Sam Darnold has been. There's no arguing that. On 4,000 more pass attempts, Baker has 4,000 more yards, 42 more touchdowns, and this is the best statistic probably for those of you who want to look at this as a fantasy asset for Baker and for DJ Moore. In the past 4 years, Baker Mayfield has had a 4.8% big-time throw percentage. Darnold's 3.5%. I think that's great for Robbie Anderson. I think that's great for DJ Moore. I think that's great for Terrace Marshall. 2 of his top 5 targets in his time in Cleveland were tight ends, David Njoku and Austin Hooper. They combined for over 250 targets over that 4-year span. Right now, the main tight ends in Carolina are Ian Thomas, he's a 4-year veteran, or Tommy Tremble, the Notre Dame product who was taken in the 3rd round just last year. He also ran a 4.6 40. It's about 6'4", 240 pounds. He's much more of that larger wide receiver athletic type tight end that we're starting to see the entire NFL move towards. If I had to take a late round pick, or if I'm targeting anyone for a really cheap price and anything that's like round 14 and beyond, I'm taking Tommy Tremble. Do I think there's a QB competition? As I said in the beginning, absolutely not. And I'm really sorry if you invested any type of a dynasty or rookie draft pick on Matt Corral. I just don't see that happening unless this Baker Mayfield situation is a 1-year deal. And he only has 1 year left. This is his 5th-year option that the Panthers traded for. They only invested a 5th-round conditional pick. So no, it's not a heavy investment. It's not a promise to say, if you do good, we'll extend you. No, absolutely not. Could that happen? Sure. I don't don't think Baker in Carolina is a match made in heaven. But if Baker saves Rule's job, and if Baker saves Fitterer's job, the GM, why wouldn't they extend him? They're going to at least offer it. Does he want to go somewhere else? Probably. The best part about it, week 1, Cleveland Browns, Carolina Panthers. And the Cleveland Browns will still be paying Baker Mayfield for him to try to beat the Cleveland Browns. The story writes itself. In all of this Deshaun Watson mess, they trade their former number 1 overall pick to the Carolina Panthers, who they play in week 1 of this season. I don't know when it's scheduled to be on TV, but that is going to have to be must-watch TV. The good news for Baker, that if he is for some reason extended, if he really does win the hearts over of everyone in Carolina, he's going to have DJ Moore all the way through 2025. The Panthers smartly extended their best pass catcher. Yes, better than CMC. It's probably what you were all thinking, but here's why. I mean, availability is sometimes your best ability. CMC is amazing. CMC is easily a top 3 running back in this entire league. But if you're not there, what good are you? DJ Moore has been there. 1,000-yard receiver for 4 straight seasons, including his rookie season. If you look at that list, only Hall of Famers have done that in their first 4 seasons. We're talking about the Randy Mosses of the world. We're talking about the Jerry Rices of the world. You've probably heard of them. I'm still a little confused on what's going on in San Francisco with Jimmy G. To me, I always thought that Jimmy G was going to be dealt first because Cleveland did pick up that 5th-year option on Baker Mayfield. Obviously, that relationship was tarnished. They had to sell him for something. This reminded me very much, for those of you who are basketball fans, it reminded me very much of the Kawhi Leonard situation in San Antonio. He wanted out. Baker wanted out. So you're losing no matter what because of the amount that you invested in that player. But if he's not going to play for you, you got to get rid of him for something. Of course, the San Antonio Spurs ended up getting, DeMar DeRozan, and the Cleveland Browns get a 5th-round conditional pick. Much different values, but this is an absolute win for the Carolina Panthers. And if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, you ought to be ecstatic. I think Baker truly does give your team at least 4 more wins because of what he can do through the air and with his arm. And then, of course, as a fantasy analysis, he makes everyone on the offense better immediately. Just by the bigger average depth of target, the amount of touchdown passes. I mean, both of these guys were in really, really bad offenses throughout their entire career. Neither one of them landed into great spots. And when you're picked in the top 5, of course, right, you're going to land in a team that truthfully needs everything, but mostly a quarterback. But Baker has shown that through that adversity, he still had a really respectable line of statistics. 15,000 passing yards in the past 4 seasons, 96 touchdowns, much better turnover-worthy play percentage as opposed to Darnold's 2. Darnold, 4.2% turnover-worthy plays brought to you by Pro Football Focus versus Baker's 3.4% turnover-worthy play percentage. So he takes care of the ball better. How he's going to do in the division is tough. I mostly like to look at teams as who's your quarterback, who's your leader, and who's your coach. I don't think Matt Rule is a bad coach. I really don't. The turnaround that he made at Baylor was phenomenal. He did the same thing in Temple. Did the same thing at Baylor. I think he can do the same thing in Carolina. Whoever's decision it was to say Sam Darnold, number 14 there in New York, that's our guy, and brought him in last year, they're obviously the ones who felt like they needed to right that wrong, bring in the better quarterback from the same draft class, and try to save their jobs. Truthfully, it's probably 50-50. But if I had to put my money on it, I have a good feeling that Baker Mayfield probably saves their jobs for at least a season or two. That's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for stopping by your new favorite fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, Jay Anaya. This is the No Offseason Fantasy Football Podcast, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.